Welcome to Cause Before Symptom, uncovering the real cabal and spiritual forces that are controlling the world. And now, here is your host, James Carner.
Welcome to Cause Before Symptom. I'm your host, James Carner. Today is November 30th, 2025, and tonight's episode is all about the return of the Registry, how the sealed testimony of Adam awakens in the last days. Very interesting show. In fact, the show is going to be uncovering what needs to be done in order to get the truth out there. And I know a lot of you are thinking a lot about that. It's like, well, what can we do? What can we say? What are the things that we can do and pray for? Well, this is going to explain all of that, because just because the volcano blew up and we now know, hopefully, if this is prophecy, the direction of where the Cave of Treasures is, it doesn't mean that we can just sit back and do nothing. There are things that still needs to be done. We need to pray, we need to discern, and we need to give ourselves an understanding of the times that we live in and share knowledge, okay? And not only that, but what happened between releasing the information, the true canon, I believe, of the Ethiopian 5th, 6th century Tewahedo church transcriptions from the information that they got throughout the Middle East. And I do believe that what I transcribed is at least as correct as I could possibly get it, because I did it myself, mainly for my own research capabilities, but it actually turned into something that is mind-blowing. As I read it, I still continue to get goosebumps. Shout out to everybody on the live chat Rumble. Number one warrior is Scorpion. Scorpion says, "Hey, Pastor. Hey, family. Glad to be back." And that's it. No one else. What's up with that? Well, let's get into breaking news.
Welcome to Shitty Breaking News with your host, James Carner, offering his shitty opinion.
Well, lawmakers suggest a follow-up to the boat strike could be a war crime. So lawmakers are going to accuse themselves of a war crime. That sounds about right. So what are they going to do? Go to Trump after Trump blows up a Navy boat that is supposed to be a, quote, drug dealer. Come on, guys. We're not in Venezuela for drugs. That's the least of our concerns. No, we are there to kick China out. They have built an entire infrastructure, and Venezuela owes China the equivalent of $2 billion in crude oil for free, because they built the entire infrastructure in Venezuela so that they can, start making money. And that is a no-no when it comes to America. And it's surprising it took America this long to let it happen. But it makes sense if you know that what I know is there are two families, the Orsini's and Lee family. Lee are the Breakspears of old. And they are fighting over who gets control of America every 4 to 8 years. And once one does, they destabilize everything that the previous president did. We're talking about left and right. And left and right politics, unfortunately, has gone worldwide, because if the left are in charge of America through the president, then that means China is in control of America. That's the research that I've done. It all goes through Chicago, and it all goes through the Bush family, who made this happen, because I don't know why, but the Bush family decided to do a deal with China to bypass the Orsini family and start this rift. And it all started in the 60s. And now we've got two powers that we're going to be talking about tomorrow night. In fact, I've got some interesting details. I'll tell you guys all about it right now. One of the shows we're going to do is called The Stone That Split Empires. We're going to go into the breaking of the spears ritual and the shard left over, and how the shard is basically what they're using to pass on through power, along with the Spear of Destiny. Very interesting story tomorrow. And then we've got the hidden right. another show for the day after. I don't know which one I'm going to do for tomorrow, but it's one of them. And this is about the Breakspear and Orsini succession. We're going to go into all of that detail here within the next 2 days. It's going to be quite interesting, and I'm excited about it. But regardless, there are two factions that are controlling the world. One is the Orsini clan. The other is the Lee family. And all of this started 250 years ago when they did a ritual called the breaking of the spear and the breaking of the stone. And whoever breaks the stone, or the philosopher's stone, through enough death and breath, well, they get control. We're going to learn all about that tomorrow. 3 children among those killed in shooting at a birthday party. God, this just happened an hour ago. A birthday party, 3 children killed. God help us. I mean, I don't even know. I don't even want to read that story. That just sounds so awful. You don't need to kill children to take away guns. Trump confirms conversation with Venezuela's Maduro. So they had a little talk. Pretty much. I'm sure the Venezuelans dude said, what do you want? Well, we want China out. And I'm pretty sure they're going to concur and allow that to happen. And America's going to take over their infrastructure and put them back into a third world country, because that's how America does things. DC National Guard shooting. Suspect spent weeks on end in isolation before he decided to shoot a bunch of people. This is the guy from Afghanistan, and now nobody from Afghanistan can come into America. So that's a bunch of bullshit. We know that is a staged event. Probably by the Trump administration in order to seal up the borders, because that's what they want to do for the time being anyway. But, Trump doesn't care about the borders. He doesn't. Orsini's don't care about the borders. They care about what the Bank for International Settlements gives them every 2 months and their orders. And that's what they care about. And vote count underway in Honduras to elect a new president in a close race. Of course it's close race, because it's either the CIA is involved or China, one or the other. Russia pretty much, I think Russia doesn't have the power, especially the spending power that China does. So I'm pretty sure that Russia doesn't have much of a say when it comes to China. So whatever China's doing, they're the ones that are in control, not Russia. So Russia's just kind of a pawn being used by both sides to, effectively move the world into a new world order. And that's what they've all been trying to do for so long. Oh, my God. And that's pretty much it for shitty breaking news. I'm sorry, there's nothing else. All right, we're going to go to a quick commercial. When we get back, we're going to talk about the return of the registry, how the sealed testimony of Adam awakens in the last days. Stick around.
Paying federal income tax is voluntary. So why has every person you know done it their entire lives? You were told it's the law, but the system was built on a lie hidden in plain sight, that you are required by law to pay. The truth is, 98% of Americans don't owe income tax by law. Federal income tax is for federal employees. For everyone else, it's voluntary. You agreed to pay when you signed your first tax return, and you've been renewing that contract every year since. Sounds too good to be true? You're asking, why doesn't everyone know this? Because almost everyone signed before they were old enough to understand it. It's time to unlearn the lie and break free from IRS jurisdictions, protect your assets, and keep more of what you earn legally. Visit unincorporatedassociations.com now and become tax-free.
I would. I'd do it. Well, I did it. We signed up Elite Potion of unincorporated association, so. And I'm telling you, it's the best thing we ever did. It kept the company alive. The company is still going. So even though we don't sell very much, but, well, it is what it is. All right. Looks like we got some more people that came. Boots and looks like Boots and Robert Gertison just showed up. What's up, guys? Thank you for being here on the show. All right. So tonight it's going to be an eye-opening show. It's going to basically tell you what to expect in the coming years especially now that the tablet of testimony is going to be found sooner or later, and the registry is going to be returned. And we're going to explain what that really means. It doesn't mean the book of life is going to be returned to the Garden of Eden or the cave of the treasures. It means that the people are going to start waking up, which is a good thing, and prophecy is going to start to unfold, which is a good thing, and the lost information that's been hidden in plain sight is all coming out. And I am able to see more clearly with the information that I've been able to gather over the past year. And in the next few days, you guys are going to find out things about the Breakspear and Lee family that you did not know, that we did talk about, but we're going to go into more detail as I found even more supporting evidence that, yep, they really did do a ritual 250 years ago where the Breakspear family, regardless of who you think they are, they were the ones that controlled Europe for 1,000 years while Satan was locked into the pit. And when Satan was released is when the Orsini family, through alchemy, basically broke their stone, and the Breakspears went underground. And where they went to is China. And the Breakspears are returning. And you know what they want? You're not going to believe what they want. They want the spear of destiny. Yeah, they want that. And so they're going after it, and they're in a hell phase to get that ready. So we're going to talk about that in the next following days. But tonight we're going to talk about the return of the registry and how the sealed testimony of Adam awakens in the last days. Now, there are moments in history when the ground beneath us grows restless like a volcano, when the air itself begins to hum with memory, when something ancient stirs after ages of silence. Most people never feel it. They move through life unaware that the world is shifting under their feet. But every so often, a generation rises that stands close enough to the threshold to sense the echo of something ancient, something sealed, beginning to awaken again. And tonight is about that awakening. Now, before there were nations, before Scripture was divided into testaments and translations, before Mount Sinai shook and Moses descended with tablets of stone, there was an actual registry. Not a metaphor, not a symbol, but a living record that existed inside Eden itself. It was the first book, not written with ink, but with breath. God spoke, Adam answered. And the space between them became the original ledger of life. Every word was communion. Every command was covenant. Every breath was identity. And the registry was open, alive, and unbroken. Then came the fall. Great. Man did not merely lose paradise, he lost jurisdiction. Didn't have the rights. And the registry did not vanish, it was actually sealed. The testimony that governed Eden was carried eastward with Adam. And it was written into prophecy, carved into memory, and hidden beneath the earth in a chamber the world forgot. Ethiopia became its vault. Ge'ez became its echo. And the cave of treasures became its archive. And the ancient fathers guarded the sealed testimony until the time appointed by God. Now, for thousands of years, that time never came. Empires rose and fell. Councils rewrote history. Denominations fractured and fought each other. The world traded unity for doctrine, truth for tradition, and breath for ritual. And the registry remained sealed. Not because the enemy succeeded, but because God ordained it. Now, Daniel saw the seal and did not understand it. Enoch saw the mysteries and was told to wait. Even John on the island of Patmos watched the Lamb open seals that humanity did not know existed. But the prophets all agreed on one thing. At the end of days, the sealed testimony would be awakened. Knowledge would increase. Hidden things would be revealed. the world would go searching for its beginning again. And the registry, the one that governed Eden, would begin to return. Now, I thought that I was responsible for breaking Daniel's seal. I was hoping that would be really cool. But I'm not the one that breaks seals. I'm just a watcher. If you would look at me, you think, hey, there's James, a prophet. Well, a prophet speaks after what God says. I don't do that. I don't say, thus saith the Lord. I haven't. I've done it a couple times through prayer, but it's really rare, and I don't feel good about it. But I am a watchman on the wall, and I do believe that I've picked up where Stan Deyo and Tom Horn and Steve Quayle left off, back to the Garden of Eden to find more information that has been sealed. And I really want you guys to understand that, because I don't want to, to come across as, okay, I am a prophet, even though it sounds really great. But in all honesty, I don't think I'd want the title, because it just makes me even more of a target. But regardless, a watcher can see things before the time. And a watcher is a person who looks beyond, on a top tower, looking beyond and seeing the danger that's coming. That's what I do. That's what my title is. I'm just a watcher. Not a watcher from the watchers, but a watchman on the wall for the kingdom of heaven. And look around. What age is this? This is the age of unveiling. The age when lost books emerge from caves and deserts. The age when Ethiopia, long ignored, suddenly stands at the center of biblical memory. The age when Ge'ez, the last unbroken witness, is being read again. And I do believe that there are dozens of people, just from this show alone, reading the Ge'ez translation now to English. And it's the age when volcanic mountains near the ancient border of Eden erupt, in the very region where Adam's testimony was hidden. The age when the earth itself begins testifying that the seal of the registry is loosening. So we are living in wonderful, exciting times. And I don't think it's a coincidence. I think we live in this time, meaning it wasn't me who broke a seal and the volcano blew up. God was already planning all of that. I believe I am one of many who have been doing research on Ethiopia, because God doesn't just choose one, he has several. And that is scriptural. Because if I fail, another one will pick it up. Now, the registry's return is not about language campaigns or new denominations. It is about archaeology or relic hunting. It is about God reestablishing what was lost. It is about the restoration of the law of life, the Edenic order written before sin, before Babel, before religion. And it is about the remnant, which is us, learning to hear the first voice again, the voice from Eden. And it is about a world being forced, to confront its origins before it faces its end. Tonight's show is not entertainment. It is a witness, which is, I believe I'm the same thing as a witness. I'm a witness and a watchman. And the registry that once governed Eden is awakening. The sealed testimony of Adam is stirring right now. And the generation living now is standing at the threshold that Daniel saw, Enoch foresaw, and the fathers of Ethiopia preserved in silence. Oh, and I just want to make one thing clear. I know in the past I've said, I think I'm a prophet. I need to take a step back. I get too excited and just be humble and say, no, I'm not a prophet. I'm just a dude who God is giving information to, and that information is going to be used by someone else that is going to do great things as well. So that's it. And I do apologize if I ever came across as being a prophet. And I know we've talked about this before, but I don't think, with my foul language, coming out as worthy of a prophet. So that's just me. So what was sealed is now opening. What was forgotten is now remembering. And what was hidden is rising on the surface. So tonight I want to welcome you to the return of the registry. This is the beginning of us remembering where we come from and us remembering and knowing in our hearts that we are written in the book of life. Isn't that a blessing? Now, the world has argued for centuries about where Eden stood, but the question was never simply geographical. Eden was the first courtroom, the first sanctuary, and the first registry chamber where heaven recorded the testimony of the human race. Every tradition that circles Eden, from the Mesopotamian river maps to the Zion temple theories, from the African plains to the occult diagrams of esoteric schools, reveals the exact same hunger, a longing to find the place where humanity last stood in unbroken fellowship with God. Yet each tradition falls short because it begins with the wrong premise. Eden is not discovered through archaeology alone. Eden is rediscovered when the sealed witness of Adam begins to speak again. Now, does that mean we all must rush to learn Ge'ez and the Ethiopian language of old? No. Does that mean we all need to study the Ethiopian Canon and then get together and tell everyone else the only way now we can speak is Ge'ez? No, that's not what we're saying. I'm saying the age has come now to where we are all going to, and the Bible says this, we're going to kind of turn towards legalism for some reason. Yeah. We're going to turn towards legalism. Isn't that crazy? And what emerges from the global literature is a fractured memory of a truth preserved only in the Ethiopian witness. Now, scholars describe Eden as a lost temple. Prophets describe Eden as the blueprint for the New Jerusalem. Occultists search for the energy lines and stargates that they believe will reopen the ancient path. And some even reassign Eden to Uganda, or even bury it beneath Babylon's dust. Each narrative grasps a fragment but misses the registry. The garden was not merely a paradise, it was a place where Adam's testimony was recorded, sealed, and hidden until the time appointed. And according to Daniel, that seal would remain unbroken until the time of the end, when knowledge increases and the scrolls return to light. So this is the moment the world is entering now. The unsealing does not begin with a committee of scholars or a council of churches. Okay? Meaning we don't have to get together and then start telling people we all have to follow the Orthodox Tewahedo Bible and their teachings. That's not what it means. It begins the moment of when the forgotten canon of the first man, the Ge'ez testimony preserved in Ethiopia, returns to the nations in its correct form. Now, when the language of Eden resurfaces, the registry awakens. And when Adam's words are read again in the tongue they were given, the veil of confusion surrounding Eden begins to tear. And this is why the enemy stirs. This is why I'm under attack right now, as he's just nailing me and trying to make me throw up. Because he doesn't want us to learn Ge'ez and read the Tewahedo Bible in Ge'ez, because when we do, that's an ancient tongue that wasn't created by Satan. So it's more of an angelic tongue that was pre-flood. And it's not the satanic languages that are out there currently. So, and I'm not saying that we all have to learn Ge'ez and then start translating, and you can, but I'm saying all of this stuff, I'm just the first to start. I'm the first of many. Okay, and I'm not going to say that it was all from me, although it's tempting that I started it all. No, I think that it's been going on for a while. We're just all catching up to it. Okay, so this is why the enemy stirs, and this is why the counterfeit Eden multiplies. And this is why the awakening of the registry accelerates the timetable of darkness. Once the testimony of Adam rises, the lies that have ruled the world since the garden begin to collapse. And the return of the registry is not simply the recovery of ancient texts. It is the restoration of original jurisdiction, meaning once we know the truth, we can stand on it, and the words that we speak have more power than ever. That's restoration of who we are. And it is heaven retrieving the first legal record of earth, the record that Satan had spent 6,000 years trying to distort, bury, or replace. Now, the elites build their artificial Edens because they know the true one is about to speak again. And you and I are on the threshold of that, the beginnings of that. And they race to open portals, CERN, raise paradises because they sense, or the raise temples, resurrect bloodlines, and engineer hybrid paradises because they sense witness that they cannot control is rising. They can attack you with their rituals, etc. But again, they're just like little darts. They don't hurt. So it is the testimony of Adam, sealed until the last days, now unfolding in real time. Remember, I said, I do believe that this show is ahead of its time. And so God is going to use everything from this show and give it to someone else who has more time, more money to run with it. I just don't have that. But I just have this little show. And every now and then I find something that's interesting. Now, tonight's show reveals what no scholar of the West dares to declare. The unsealing began the moment the ancient tongue returned and the plume of the earth confirmed the movement of heaven. And the testimony of Adam has awakened. The registry is now returning, and every power on earth, spiritual or political, now reacts to the sound of a scroll they thought would remain silent forever. Well, when the volcano blew up, that was God saying, yep, it's time. It's time to start showing people the true registry so they can stand on the word, the correct word, and speak with authority. And Satan doesn't like that, of course. Now, the return of the registry can only be understood by going back to where it began, Eden itself. Not the Eden of children's books or Western imagination, but the real garden Scripture describes as a place of origin, order, and law. Eden was not simply a paradise, it was the first courtroom, the first sanctuary, the first place where heaven and earth touched without barrier. And at the center of that place was the registry, the book of life. And before the fall, Adam did not need scripture. He did not need tablets or scrolls or priests or intermediaries. The word of God was spoken directly into his breath, and the breath of Adam answered back without distortion. He was in communion with the Father at all times. And every command God uttered became part of Adam's identity. And every response Adam gave became part of the divine record. This communion, this direct exchange of breath was the original book of life. It held not only Adam's name, but his purpose, his authority, and the boundaries of the world he was entrusted to govern. This is why the registry matters. It is not a ledger of who gets into heaven. That's important. It was the system by which all creation was ordered. Remember, God knew who you were before you were born. He had an idea of you that he wanted. And it was the blueprint of covenant. It was the first pattern of law written on the stone, but not on the stone, but on the human spirit itself. And when Adam obeyed, he lived inside that registry, unharmed, protected. But when he disobeyed, he stepped outside its jurisdiction. Thus, the registry did not change. Adam's relationship to it did. And when Adam was driven eastward, he carried the remnants of that registry with him. The Ethiopian Canon preserves what the Western world lost, that Adam spoke prophecy before he died, that he recorded what he saw. He had many dreams and he recorded them, that he instructed Seth to guard the testimony, and that these writings were kept in a secret chamber, the cave of treasures, until the end time. Now, Adam's departure from Eden did not erase the registry. It sealed it. Remember, his bones had to go be buried in Golgotha, where Jesus would later be sacrificed. His blood would hit the skull of Adam, sealing it. And in sealing it, God ensured that humanity would one day rediscover what it had forgotten. Now, Eden's registry did not disappear. It was just dormant. Its echoes survived in the early patriarchs, but in the memory of the righteous line and in the word preserved in Ge'ez long before Greek or Latin touched Scripture. So the registry remained alive in heaven, but it was hidden on earth, waiting for the age of unveiling when humanity would once again seek its origins. Now, understanding Eden as the birthplace of the registry is the foundation of everything that follows. The return of the registry is not nostalgia. It is not religion. It is not mysticism. It is the restoration of the original order God established before sin entered the world. It is the reawakening of the testimony that once governed creation. And to understand its return, the generation living now must understand what was lost and why God ordained that it would one day be restored. That's what you're going to learn tonight, what was lost and what will be restored. Now, while the nations fought over pieces of sacred geography, heaven never lost track of its coordinates of Adam's testimony. The forgetting was not accidental, it was permitted. A sealed record cannot be tampered with, and the garden's location could not be entrusted to empires that had no covenant with God. Every civilization that laid claim to Eden did so in rebellion or pride, proving precisely why Eden remained hidden. And the Lord protected the registry not by force, but by silence, allowing the world to wander in myth until the appointed hour arrived. Now, to understand the registry and why it must return, in the last days, it must first be understood why God chose Ethiopia as the place where the testimony would be hidden. For one, nobody would even think of looking in Ethiopia, of all places. But Western tradition points to Mesopotamia or Armenia and the Levant as the cradle of sacred history. But the Ethiopian canon, the geography preserved beneath layers of time, and the ancient movements of the patriarchs, well, it reveals a whole different story, one that shifts the entire biblical map, one that made Italy try to conquer it twice and fail. The Vatican's HQ headquarters is located in Italy, just so you know. Eden lay in the highlands of the west of what is now modern Ethiopia, from what I've discovered so far. And when Adam was expelled, he journeyed eastward into the very terrain where the Cave of Treasures would later be established. This matters because it means the registry did not travel far. It was just displaced, but it wasn't lost. Adam's prophecy, his recounting of creation, his instructions to his son Seth, and the testimony of the early generations were preserved in the land God had ordained long before Babel scattered the nations. Ethiopia was not chosen accidentally. It was chosen as a sanctuary for the first memory of humanity. The Ethiopian canon preserves this more faithfully than any Western text. It records the hiding of Adam's writings. It documents the guardianship of the righteous line. It describes the cave where the treasures of Eden, the gold, the incense, the oil of mercy, and the patriarchal scrolls were sealed. I'd love to find that gold, but that's just me. It recounts the persistence of a language unbroken by Babel. Ge'ez, the only surviving thread that still carries the tonal and structural remnants of Adamic speech, or Adamic. And it preserves the earliest Christian witness unaltered by Roman councils or European retranslation, or just Rome. Geography strengthens the case even further. The volcanic ridge stretching around Haley Gubby, the ancient highlands that overlook the path Adam would have walked, The circular ruins and sealed shafts carved into the desert and the proximity between Eden's biblical rivers and the Ethiopian plateau form a coherent picture. Ethiopia is the vault because Ethiopia was the only nation capable of guarding the testimony without losing it. They never lost faith. They never were greedy. They never had a banking system like a central bank. Empires trampled every other continent, but Ethiopia endured. Why? When the Ark of the Covenant was carried south from Israel, it was not escaping invaders. It was returning to the land chosen at the beginning. When Christianity reached Ethiopia, it did not arrive as a foreign message. It actually awakened a memory already embedded in the hills. When the first churches were carved into stone, they were not innovations. They were restorations of patterns older than Sinai. So Ethiopia is not the footnote of sacred history. It is the archive. And you're going to start to hear more and more about Ethiopia now because God told us so through a volcano. And this is why the registry's return cannot be separated from Ethiopia. In the last days, the world is drawn back to the only place where the testimony was preserved unbroken. The land, the language, the canon, and the sealed chamber all converge into one truth. God appointed Ethiopia to guard the registry until the appointed hour. And now, for the first time in ages, the world is beginning to look toward that vault again. I can't be the only one. And again, like I've said, I need to take a step back and ground myself because, hey, when you stumble across information that nobody else has, it gets exciting and you can really lose yourself. Like I believe I have, because when that volcano blew up, my mind just raced. I was like, "Whoa, what is going on, man? Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." Because it just defied all reality to me, you know? And then it took me a while to kind of get back to being grounded into the word and being humble again and quit, trying to save the world all by myself, right? Because that's just in my nature. I want to help people. And I also need to realize that, why am I doing this? Is it for my glory or is it for his? And so that's really important for all of us, including me, to ground ourselves back to the whole reason why we're getting this information. It's not so that we can exploit it and use it for our pride. It's so that we can get to the bottom of the truth, so we can stand on the truth and speak fire where the devil cannot touch. So we can reclaim who we are in Jesus Christ as a part of the body. Now, the academic world insisted on bending the four rivers toward Mesopotamia. And I remember as a kid watching, like some guest pastors come to our church, and they would, show the Eden in the Middle East, and they would say over time the rivers went from here to here. And I remember it didn't make too much sense to me. I was thinking, man, it just seems like they're stretching on this one. Well, it seems like they were, if Ethiopia is the correct place, because it refused to believe the text at face value. At least those pastors did at that time. In trying to force Eden into a familiar map, scholars exposed their own blindness. They treated the rivers as static labels rather than pre-flood markers of a world whose topography no longer exists. Well, the Ethiopian witness, however, never wavered on that. It preserved the memory of a river flowing out of a high place, exactly what we see in the volcanic spine of Ethiopia. And the rivers were never meant to lead scholars to Iraq, believe it or not. They were breadcrumbs pointing towards the highlands where Adam's bones would one day testify again. And the return of the registry begins where it was hidden, because God never loses what he seals, okay? And he will not be mocked. And when you really, really search for the truth, he will expose things to you that will blow your mind, and then he'll wait and see how you're going to deal with it. Now, the registry did not vanish. It was sealed. And this is the part of the story most overlooked by Western Christianity. Yet it is the hinge upon which the entire prophetic timeline turns. The sealing of the testimony was not an accident of history, nor the result of persecution or even neglect. It was the deliberate act of God recorded in the Ethiopian Canon, echoed in the books of Adam and Enoch, and confirmed by Daniel's vision. The registry was closed because humanity was not ready to carry what it contained. Now, Daniel is the first to speak directly of a sealed book, commanded by an angel to shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Those are pretty harsh words when you really think about it. Shut up the words. That means ixnay on the words I don't know, pig Latin. But Daniel's writings were never hidden. His weren't. His scrolls circulated throughout Israel and Babylon. They were read, copied, and preserved. Therefore, the book sealed in Daniel's vision could not have been Daniel's own prophecy. It had to refer to something older, maybe something more primordial, or something that already existed in a sealed state when Daniel received his vision. Now, the Ethiopian books of Adam reveal what the Western canon omitted, that Adam left behind a written testimony. That's a huge revelation. A record of creation, the fall, the promise of the Messiah, and the divine order of the world. Believe me, the moment we get our hot little hands on that, all other religions die. And Seth preserved this testimony. The patriarchs guarded it, and it was placed inside the cave of treasures along with Adam's bones and Eve's, Adam and Eve's. The gold of Eden was placed there too, which has to be the purest of all purest golds if it came from Eden, and the sacred vessels of the first altar. It was sealed until the last age, a phrase used repeatedly in the Ethiopian texts. Are we in the last age? Well, I've been wrong. I think we still have 115 years, but I don't know. But man, information is coming at us left from right, and it sure does seem like knowledge has increased. And if we can use Jesus, his own words, just as in the days of Noah, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Man, we're close. Now, the sealing served a twofold purpose. First, it prevented the enemy from corrupting the origins of humanity. God made sure that Satan didn't get his grubby little hands on the witness of testimony. If Satan could distort the beginning, which he would love to, he could distort the destiny. And God sealed the testimony not to hide truth from his people, but to protect truth from his adversary. Second, the sealing ensured that the registry would surface only when the world had reached the prophetic moment when revelation outweighs rebellion. The early patriarchs were guardians of the deposit that belonged to a future generation, not their own. And I do believe that since mankind 75% of mankind took the experimental mRNA gene therapy drug that thinks it's a vaccine, that identifies as a vaccine. I do believe that's when Satan attacked our bloodlines to kill the bloodline of Seth or Adam or Abel, all of that bloodline where Jesus came from. And sealing is a theme carried through the entire biblical narrative. Enoch is told to write certain things, but not reveal them. If the Lord told me not to reveal it, that would suck. I don't know. I'm just saying. I'm too impatient. Maybe that's why he doesn't give me other things. But Enoch is told to write certain things, but not reveal them. And Moses ascends to Sinai twice because the first tablets were broken. Moses broke them. He chucked them at his people when they were worshiping the golden idol, cow, symbolizing the fracture between humanity and the registry. Now, Isaiah speaks of a book sealed to those who cannot read. John in Revelation watches the Lamb open seals that no man can touch. And Daniel, standing in Babylon, is told that the true archive of divine memory will remain inaccessible until many run to and fro and knowledge is increased. Well, I think we're here. This is the age that the prophets saw. AI, robots, synthetics, artificial intelligence with the image of God, but just an image with a false breath, which is knowledge. Now, the seal was not paper. It wasn't wax. It wasn't metal. The seal was simple time. The registry was locked behind an appointed moment. Humanity could not open it. Scholars could not decode it. And empires could not claim it. Only God could decide when the testimony preserved in Eden's shadow would awaken again. And this reveals the heart of the matter. The registry was sealed because truth itself needed a set hour to rise. And the world is now rearing that hour. The patterns actually match. The convergence is undeniable. Hidden books are resurfacing. Lost languages are being studied again. Ethiopia is being examined instead of ignored. And the spiritual hunger for origins is global, not local. Now, the seal is not broken by archaeology or scholarship. It loosens when God declares the generation ready. And for the first time in ages, the evidence suggests the seal is no longer silent. Who is worthy to break the seal? Isn't it Jesus? Or is it one of the angels who broke the seals of and poured the bowls? But the Lord entrusted Ethiopia with Ge'ez, not because Ethiopia was powerful, but because Ethiopia was faithful. They really were. They didn't take the word and then create a church to control people. Languages die when nations chase idols, and Ge'ez survived because the testimony it carried could not be allowed to fade. And while the West adopted Latin, Rome adopted empire, and Babylon adopted sorcery. And Ethiopia preserved the only tongues still capable of carrying Adam's original registry, and no other nation qualified. The survival of Ge'ez is itself a prophecy, protected like the ark, sealed until its words would expose every counterfeit throne. If you go see my last night's show, you can see the history of Ge'ez and how prophetic it is. When discussing the registry's return, it is impossible to ignore the one element that has remained unchanged since the days of Eden's eastern exile: the language. Not Hebrew, which evolved, not Greek, which was imposed, not Latin, which reshaped doctrine. The language that matters is Ge'ez, the last surviving thread that still carries the cadence, structure, and conceptual worldview of the earliest speech of the righteous line. Ge'ez does not matter because it is Ethiopian. It matters because it is untouched. And even the Ethiopian Canon says itself that Adam wrote on the tablets in Ge'ez. The Ethiopian Canon preserves a linguistic ecosystem frozen in time. Ge'ez is not simply ancient, it is pre-Hellenistic, pre-rabbinic, pre-Roman, and unaltered by theological battles of Europe and the Middle East. And its alphabet, its verbal roots, and its symbolic structures all reflect a worldview far older than later Semitic languages. So it contains no Greek philosophical baggage and no Latin legalism, nor Western interpretive frames. It's raw, elemental, and closer to the way Adam's descendants remembered divine speech. And what makes Ge'ez central to the registry is not its ethnicity, but its stability. After Babel fractured the nations, most languages fragmented beyond recognition. Ge'ez did not. According to the Ethiopian tradition, it was preserved intentionally by the righteous line as a custodial language, kept pure for preserving sacred testimony. That is why the books of Adam, Jubilees, Enoch, and the Cave of Treasures appear most complete in Ge'ez rather than Hebrew or Greek. It's not that Ethiopia expanded the canon, it's that Europe diminished it and its meaning. The structure of Ge'ez reveals something even deeper. It is a trilateral root language with patterns that emphasize action, breath, and divine agency, mirroring the way Eden functioned before the fall, where word and reality were not separate. Matter, spirit, combined. Its syntax often places God at the animating force behind verbs, reinforcing that creation itself responds to divine voice. And this aligns with the concept of the registry as a living record shaped by the interaction between divine speech and human response. When the prophets speak of the return of the ancient paths, they're not describing nostalgia, but the restoration of an original linguistic and conceptual worldview. The registry cannot return in the language of its corruption. It must return in the language closest to its origin. And that is why in the last days there is a sudden global interest in Ethiopia's forgotten texts. This is why Ge'ez is being recovered after centuries of neglect. And that is why spiritual discernment is awakening specifically in those who encounter these writings. I'm just curious if any of you guys who are listening to the show tonight, if you've ever felt anything different in reading the English translation of the Ge'ez version of the Tewahedo Orthodox Church, 5th, 6th century scrolls. I'm curious if when you guys read it, is it easier to read or it's just like reading the Bible? Boring, it makes you want to fall asleep. So the return of the registry does not mean the world will speak Ge'ez. No, I don't think we can force the world to do that. People are getting tired of religion. But it does mean the testimony preserved in Ge'ez becomes the plumb line for all truth. It becomes the standard, the calibration, the measure by which corrupted doctrines are exposed. And in the end of days, God does not give the world a new language. It doesn't say that. Not in the Bible, nor in the Ethiopian canon. But he brings the world back to the one that never broke. He brings them back to the language. Doesn't mean you have to speak it, but it does mean that they transcribed the scrolls from Hebrew and Greek to their language, Ge'ez, and I transcribed it to English. And from that is how I believe the original documents that were written in true form have reappeared again, but with more spirit and matter combined. So this reveals that language is not merely a vessel of communication. It is a vessel of revelation. The registry was first spoken in a language of breath. Breath. Wrote a book about it. And the closest echo of that breath today is Ge'ez. And as the registry returns, God calls his remnant to the language that still carries Eden's memory. Now, Satan understood that the moment Adam's true testimony reappeared, the dominion he constructed through kingdoms, bloodlines, and secret orders would begin to unravel. Well, believe me, check out my next 2 shows, next couple of days. And yeah, Satan's kingdom's going to unravel. We're going to expose some really deep stuff. His solution, Satan, well, was simple. Build so many false Edens that the world could not recognize the real one. And believe me, I would have never looked towards Ethiopia. If I didn't research what all of the satanic religions, like, Hermeticism, Luciferianism, Satanism, all that. If I didn't research what they were looking for, what they were stealing from other people, I would have never found the Ruach or the breath. I would have never found what they were stealing. And when I wrote a book about the breath war, that they were stealing breath from mankind, I would have never even considered Ethiopia. And when I can't remember how I turned over to that canon, I can't remember how it happened, but The moment I started reading it, all I kept seeing was every other word was breath, 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 breath. I'm like, oh my God, I got to take this more seriously. Which led us to where we are tonight, the return of the registry. Breath is key to communion with God, and the Ethiopian canon says it all throughout it. Now, from Babylon's ziggurats to Rome's basilicas, from esoteric diagrams to New Age energy grids, every counterfeit Eden served the same purpose: to drown out the registry. But counterfeits are loud, truth are quiet. Truth is quiet. And when the registry awakens, the noise of imposters collapses under its own weight. So the return of the registry is not just theoretical. It is not symbolic either. And it is not something that must be imagined or forced into existence. It's God's timing, right? And when God begins to unseal what was hidden since the days of Adam, the world responds spiritually, intellectually, geographically, and even geologically. And the signs are not vague impressions. They are measurable shifts that align precisely with the prophetic pattern given in Daniel, Enoch, Revelation, and the Ethiopian canon. The first sign is the global hunger for origins. For generations, humanity drifted away from ancient memory, satisfied with denominational walls and inherited traditions. But in this generation, something has changed. Millions are suddenly questioning the official narrative of human history. That's why we're talking about the mud flood. Scholars are reevaluating canons long considered settled. Believers and skeptics alike are searching for Eden and the early patriarchs, the place of the beginnings. This hunger is not a cultural trend. It's a spiritual summons. God awakens desire for truth only when he intends to reveal it. And he can only do it in Christians because those are the ones who obey, the ones he can use. The second sign is the resurfacing of hidden texts. For centuries, the books of Adam, Enoch, Jubilees, and the Cave of Treasures existed on the margins, ignored, dismissed, or stripped from the Western canon, period. Yet now they are emerging from monasteries, deserts, libraries, and private collections. Digital scans are appearing everywhere. Translations multiply. Lost manuscripts surface in Ethiopia, Egypt, Armenia, and the Levant. These texts are not appearing because scholars suddenly grew curious. They are appearing because the seal is loosening. The third sign is the unprecedented attention on Ethiopia itself. The world is being drawn almost magnetically toward the region where the registry was hidden. Archaeologists are studying rock-hewn churches and ancient monasteries. Pilgrims are rediscovering the traditions of Axum and Lalibela. And scholars are identifying Ethiopia as the only nation with an intact pre-exilic biblical canon. Even secular researchers cannot explain why Ethiopia's manuscripts have remained so complete. The pattern is unmistakable. The world is turning toward the vault. And the fourth sign is the awakening of language. Ge'ez, once confined to liturgy and monastic archives, is becoming studied again by people who have no ancestral connection to Ethiopia. Linguists note its stability. Theologians recognize its theological purity, and believers feel an unexplainable pull towards its sound and structure. That's not nostalgia. This is the registry calling. Meaning, it's not us that's doing it. God is calling us. It's not me that broke the seal. It's God calling us towards him, revealing himself through volcanic explosions in a place that hasn't had a volcanic explosion for 10 to 12,000 years. And then there are the signs of the earth itself, the volcanic activity near Haley Gubby. Come on. The tremors along the ancient ridge, the satellite anomalies, circular depressions, sealed shafts, ancient village patterns appearing near the corridor where the Cave of Treasures logically resides based on patriarchal movement. I don't think these are coincidences. Scripture says creation groans when God prepares to reveal something long hidden. Geological disturbances is the land of origin. It's not random. It is testimony. And we just showed that When God unseals a mystery, he does not whisper it. He lets the world feel it. Human curiosity rises, lost books reappear, languages awaken, nations turn their attention to forgotten lands, and even the ground shifts. Everything in heaven and earth moves into alignment. And Adam's testimony was never merely a study or story. It was the first legal deposition of mankind. It recorded the terms, the fall, the promise, and the bloodline through which redemption would come. The ultimate tablet defined. Satan has no legal claim over humanity except through distortion of that record. And this is why the enemy fought to bury Adam's true testimony and elevate corrupted versions. But once the original document resurfaces, spiritual jurisdiction will shift, and the courtroom will reset. And heaven presents the evidence, and the kingdoms of the world feel the tremor of a case that is about to be reopened. The registry is not returning quietly, it is returning with signs. Now, whenever God begins to restore something ancient, something foundational, darkness responds with urgency and imitation. The registry is no exception. In fact, no other testimony poses a greater threat to the kingdom of deception than the restoration of the Edenic record. The registry carries identity, covenant, order, and origin. Darkness thrives only where these four pillars are distorted. And when the registry returns, distortion collapses. That is why the enemy has fought its emergence for thousands of years. Now, the first layer is resistance, and is historical distortion. We've been seeing a lot of that lately. The moment the early church drifted toward or under Roman control, the battles over origin began. Books that preserved the primordial testimony were removed. The Western canon shrank. The meanings of words shifted. Eden becomes a metaphor. The patriarchs become legends. The very idea of pre-Mosaic registry was erased. And darkness did not need to destroy the testimony. It just needed only to bury it under layers of doctrine, councils, and creeds. If humanity forgot where it began, it would never understand where it is heading. The second layer is denominational fragmentation. A fractured church divided between traditions, languages, councils, and interpretations cannot recover the registry, nor can it be that 1 out of 3 churches has a Freemason pastor. They will never be restored in that way. Each denomination defends its territory. Each insists its lens is correct, and all of them unknowingly inherited a history edited by empires not preserved by God. The Ethiopian canon stands outside this fracture because it was never governed by Rome, Athens, Alexandria, or Geneva. And that is why the enemy works so hard to keep Ethiopia marginalized and its texts dismissed. The registry survived there untouched while the rest of the world argued over the scraps. The third layer is resistance is counterfeit revelation. As the true registry begins to stir, false prophets, false canons, false spiritual experiences will multiply, meaning get ready for them to find some archaeological find somewhere like Gopali Tupi or whatever that is. Oh my God, we found a civilization that's 15,000 years old. Whoop-de-doo. This is not accidental. Darkness imitates what God restores. If the registry is awakening, then the world will be flooded with counterfeits designed to confuse and mislead. Pseudepigrapha are elevated over true ancient texts, and occult systems mimic Edenic concepts. Mystical traditions borrow languages from Enoch while stripping it of its holiness, and even New Age and technological ideologies begin speaking of ascension, identity, and light, echoing truths that they do not understand. So counterfeit always rises when the real approaches. And it could just be once people start finding out that the Garden of Eden is in Ethiopia, and then they start reading the Tewahedo Canon, that's when the devil needs to release the aliens. The fourth layer is identity corruption. The registry restores the truth of who humanity is and who humanity belongs to. Darkness counters this with the rise of identity confusion. We got that going on. Transhumanism, synthetic selfhood, and digital personhood. If the registry reestablishes God-defined identity, the beast system must create human-defined identity. The conflict is not political, it is ontological, and the registry says you were known from the beginning, and the beast says you may become whatever you invent. One grounds humanity in Eden, the other uproots humanity entirely. And finally, the great resistance occurs in the spiritual realm, where darkness attempts to accelerate deception as the registry nears return. The enemy fears the restoration of the original law of life, the Edenic order that exposes the schemes. And he fears the remnant who can read the registry, not with eyes, but with discernment. And that remnant cannot be manipulated, seduced, or intimidated, as they recognize truth because they recognize its voice. The enemy does not fear churches, institutions, or even doctrines. He fears memory. He fears origin. He fears the registry, the book of life. And for when humanity remembers the beginning, darkness loses control of the narrative. And when the registry returns, even the beast system trembles, not because humans gain power, but because God reclaims the storyline that was his from the first breath spoken in Eden. The Cave of Treasures was the first archive, a divine library carved into the earth. It held Adam's bones not as relics, but as witnesses. And Eve's, of course. Every patriarch who tended the cave was participating in a chain of custody spanning millennia. And the enemy never found this archive because it was not hidden geographically. It was hidden legally. Only those under covenant could guard it. And when the volcanic plume traced the ancient path eastward, creation itself testified to the location of the archive returning to light. And you could better bet that many nations now are going to start to get themselves in Ethiopia and get themselves over there to dig that thing up. But good luck. You're not going to get it. Ethiopia is blessed by the Father and protected. The return of the registry is not merely historical or linguistic. It is prophetic. Every major prophet or prophetic voice like Enoch, Moses, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Daniel, Christ, Jesus, John, and the Ethiopian fathers, they all speak of a final generation that will be brought back under an ancient order before the end of the age. Now, this order is not the Mosaic Law as practiced by Israel. This is what I was telling you about. We're going to go back to legalism in a way. We're going to go back to the law in the end of days. That's what the Bible says, and so does the Ethiopian Canon. I'm going to explain that. It's not going to be legalism. Hear me out. It's not rabbinic Judaism or legalistic religion. It is the law of life, the Edenic covenant written before sin, before sacrifice, before nations, and before temples. Now, the law of life governed Eden. It was the internal alignment between God and Adam, expressed through breath, speech, obedience, and transparency. Adam did not need commandments. He needed only proximity. That proximity was the law. When Adam fell, humanity did not simply break rules. Humanity broke alignment. The Ethiopian Canon preserves this loss with more clarity than any Western text. It teaches that Adam's fall created a rupture between the human soul and the divine registry. The commandments that came later were temporary scaffolding until the original alignment could one day be restored. Prophecy describes that restoration. Enoch foresaw a generation that would rediscover the wisdom of the ancients and walk again in the paths of righteousness that were from the beginning. Daniel foresaw a people who would resist the beast system not through force but through fidelity to the covenant written before time. Isaiah spoke of a moment when God would restore the judges as at the first and the counselors as at the beginning, returning humanity to an Eden-like order. Jeremiah declared that in the last days, God would write his law upon their hearts, not stone, but language describing the registry itself. And Jesus Christ taught that he came not to destroy the law, but to fulfill it, to restore the original order broken by Adam. And Revelation identifies the remnant as those who keep the commandments of God and the testimony of Jesus, meaning they walk in both Edenic alignment and Messianic identity. Nothing wrong with that. The Ethiopian Canon combines these threads into a single declaration. At the end of the days, God awakens the testimony sealed within the Cave of Treasures, and the world is forced to confront the original covenant. This is why the registry must return. It's not a curiosity. It is a requirement for the final judgment, as heaven does not judge humanity according to the distortions of later ages. Heaven judges according to the first voice spoken in the garden. Now, the restoration of the law of life is not the rise of legalism. It is the death of deception. When the registry returns, humanity is brought face to face with the truth of who God is and who humans were created to be. This destroys every false doctrine, every counterfeit identity, and every beast-born narrative that claims authority over the human soul. The unsealing did not occur at random. It came at a time when the global powers are preparing their final deception, when technology mimics omniscience, and when humanity is being conditioned to accept a synthetic Eden. In such a moment, heaven releases the original testimony so no one can claim ignorance. And the registry returns precisely because the beast system is nearly assembled. God always reveals truth right before judgment falls. And the registry's return is the prophetic hinge of the end of times. Without it, humanity cannot be restored to its original order. With it, the remnant becomes aligned to the very covenant Adam once carried, preparing the world for the appearing of the one who fulfills the law of life as the last Adam. So the registry returns to the world can no longer pretend it does not know the truth. Now, if the registry began as breath in Eden and survived as sealed testimony in Ethiopia, then the question becomes unavoidable. Will the registry return only as revelation, or will it also return in physical form? Good question. Scripture, the Ethiopian canon, and the patterns of sacred history all point to the same answer. In the final generation, God raises both spiritual and earthly witnesses. The registry does not return as spirit alone. It returns through evidence. Evidence the world cannot ignore. The Ethiopian tradition has always held that Adam's final prophecy, the book of the righteous, the genealogical record of the early patriarchs, and the treasures of Eden were hidden in a chamber carved beneath the eastern mountains. This chamber, the Cave of Treasures, was not named for wealth, but for witness. It held the gold of Eden, which is weird, Christopher, because remember when we saw that golden plant, golden shrub? How bizarre. The incense of Adam's first altar and the oil of mercy given to them when he lay dying, and the scrolls recording the beginning of the world. It also held the bones of Adam and Eve, wrapped and preserved and positioned so that future generations would understand their origin. These artifacts were not stored for archaeologists. They were preserved for the final age. You and me, or our children, or maybe our children's children. But I don't think any further than that. But I could be wrong. I'm wrong a lot. But I'm getting closer. The Ethiopian canon openly declares that these treasures were sealed until the time when the earth is overturned, when truth shall rise from the dust, and when the last days draw near. Now, the Western world treated these claims as legend because it had no framework for the idea that physical proof of Genesis history might resurface before judgment. But the early church understood something modern believers have forgotten. God uses physical evidence to confront unbelief before he brings final reckoning. Noah's Ark is testimony. Sodom's ruins is testimony. Christ's empty tomb is testimony. The rediscovery of ancient scrolls is testimony, like 1947. The Dead Sea Scrolls. Why would the oldest testimony of humanity be the one exception? Well, we've explored the possibility, indeed the likelihood, that the registry's return includes the unveiling of what lies beneath the ancient Ethiopian highlands. That's what I believe. And the anomalies surrounding Haley Gubby. And the circular depression that resembles sealed entrances. I can't explain what they are. It's an anomaly, just like Christopher says. Something's going on there. And the straight line plume that coincidentally followed the corridor between Eden and the cave? That's bizarre. And the ancient habitation rings identical to early patriarchal dwellings? That's bizarre. And the proximity of volcanic vents that appear plugged as though intentionally sealed? They do. They're all over the place. It's weird. And the topographical logic that aligns with every direction given in the book of Adam? Dude, you can't dismiss this as, not something to consider and study. Taken individually, each anomaly is interesting. Taken together, they form a mosaic. That's what I believe. Now, the early witness does not contradict revelation, it confirms it. When God unseals something spiritually, he often allows the earth to testify physically so that unbelief is left without excuse. Christ rose spiritually, yet the stone rolled physically. And the Spirit fell at Pentecost, yet tongues of fire manifested. The heavenly registry opens in Revelation, yet earthly signs accompany it. This is the pattern of God. Revelation first, evidence second. If the registry is returning in this generation, the world should expect the testimony of Adam, the scrolls, the chamber, and possibly even the bones to surface as a final witness before judgment. The Ethiopian Canon makes this possibility explicit. The prophets describe it. The terrain suggests it. And the signs in the earth are beginning to echo it. And I just thought about it. What if they left Eve's bones and only took Adam's? And what they find are bones of a female and a tablet written in Ge'ez with gold, oil, and incense. I don't know. But the signs of the earth and in the earth are beginning to echo it. And when a heavenly seal breaks, earthly powers feel it. And that is why nations accelerate surveillance, why religious institutions harden their doctrines, and why occult networks attempt to reclaim sacred geography, and why the financial powers seek to unify the world under digital control. They sense that something ancient has awakened, something that exposes their plans as imitations. The registry is not a metaphor. It is an indictment, and the powers of this age tremble before it. Believe me, when Haley Gubby went off, the dynasties were freaking out. The registry's return is not merely a spiritual awakening. It is a confrontation with the physical truth of humanity's origin. A truth sealed by God, preserved by a remnant, buried beneath Ethiopia's ancient mountains, and destined to rise when the world reaches the hour Daniel saw. The registry does not return into a neutral world. It returns into a world actively constructing its own counterfeit version of identity, memory, and destiny. Scripture calls this structure the beast system, a global order that attempts to redefine humanity at the very moment God begins to restore Eden's record. That's what's happening. The clash is not geopolitical either. It is economic. Or it's not economic. It is not even cultural, but it is existential, as the beast system seeks to remake humanity without reference to the Creator. Robots. And the registry returns to remind humanity of who it truly is. The beast system is fundamentally a system of false identity. It replaces the God-given registry, the description of what it means to be human, with synthetic alternatives. In the earliest stages, this counterfeit identity appears as secular humanism, self-invention, and personal autonomy. But in its final form, it becomes technological, digital souls, database personhood, biometric governance, and a world where identity is no longer inherited from God, but assigned by systems. That's not an accident. The beast system must erase memory to gain control. That's why they need a great reset in 2030. If humanity remembers Eden, the fall of Adam, and the covenant of life, and the original registry, well, the beast loses its claim to define humanity's future. This is why the end-time empire focuses obsessively on documentation, surveillance, authentication, and digital registries. Books built by man to replace the book of life written by God. Every vaccine passport, biometric ID, global registry, or implanted credential echoes the same spirit. We will define you. That's why you have to resist this crap. And the registry's return exposes the lie. The moment humanity remembers that identity comes from Eden, not from empire, the beast system loses spiritual authority. So the more we talk about Ethiopia, the Garden of Eden, the Cave of Treasures, Adam and Eve and their testimony, the tablet of testimony, the more Satan can't get ground on building his surveillance programs. So if we continue to share this with others and read it openly and talk about it, Satan loses ground. The moment humanity remembers that identity comes from Eden and not from empire, the beast system loses spiritual authority. And this is why the enemy has always feared the restoration of the ancient testimony. Because the registry says you were written before you were born. And the beast system says you will be rewritten according to the needs of the state. Screw that. These two foundations cannot coexist. One must destroy the other. And the beast also wages war through historical suppression. By erasing the books of Adam, Enoch, Jubilees, and the Ethiopian Canon from Western Christianity, the enemy ensured that generations would grow up without knowledge of their beginnings. People without memory are easily controlled, and people without origin are easily reassigned new meaning. And when the registry returns, the emptiness the beast depends on collapses. Then there's the technological dimension, artificial intelligence, digital immortality projects, genome editing, neural interfaces, and global data systems all attempt to offer what the registry already contains: a record of identity, a definition of humanity, and the promise of future existence. These are not merely technological developments, they are theological counterfeits. As the beast is building a rival registry. You shall live forever, just take the mark. But God's registry is biological, spiritual, eternal. The beast is mechanical, fragile, temporary. And the return of the registry confronts the world with the original record of life, making the counterfeit unnecessary and the deception visible. It strips the beast system of moral legitimacy by revealing the oldest truth, that humanity already has a registry, and it was written long before the engineers of the final empire existed. Every modern movement, climate ideology, transhumanist salvation, genetic modification, universal basic income, global governance, all serves one overreaching and overarching goal: to rebuild a paradise without God. The elites want the benefit of Eden, but reject its king and reject what Jesus did for us. And their utopia is fully engineered, managed, and surveilled, and optimized for obedience, not freedom. But the return of Adam's registry reveals that humanity was never meant to enter paradise through machinery. Paradise comes only when the testimony is fulfilled and the Redeemer returns. That's Jesus. So the end times conflict is not merely a battle for territory or government. It's a battle for memory. It's a battle for identity. The beast system cannot fully rise if the world remembers who wrote humanity's name first. And the registry's return forces that memory back into the open, disrupting the entire architecture of the final empire. Now, with the history traced, the signs examined, the counterfeit exposed, and the prophetic pattern established, the final question emerges. What does it actually mean for the registry to return? Not symbolically, not academically, not spiritually alone. What does the return of the registry look like in the lived experience of the final generation? Well, the answer is both astonishingly simple and profoundly consequential. The return of the registry is the restoration of alignment between humanity and the voice that first spoke in Eden. It is the reawakening of the original order, the law of life, written into Adam before the fall. And when the registry returns, it does not drag humanity back to the ancient civilization. It restores humanity to the divine pattern that has been waiting since the beginning. The return begins with the remnant, not the world. Scripture never says all nations will return to Eden. It says a people will. Your heart. Who do you give your heart to? It's not satanic to give your heart to Eden, where Adam and Eve once dwelled. Jesus would walk with them during the cool of the evening. A remnant with discernment becomes the first expression of the restored registry on earth. They read the hidden books and understand them. They recognize the truth preserved in Ge'ez. They discern the counterfeit system rising around them. They reject the beast's false identity and cling to the identity written before time. They walk in Edenic alignment, not perfectly but truly, bearing the testimony of Jesus Christ and the commandments of God. This remnant must and becomes the earthly vessel for the registry's return. Their obedience reopens the channels of revelation, and their purity frustrates the plans of the final empire. Their memory disrupts the great forgetting that the enemy depends on, and their alignment creates a spiritual corridor through which Eden begins to descend, not as geography, but as jurisdiction. The return of the registry also means the restoration of judicial order. In Eden, relationship was law. Alignment was law. Breath was law. When the registry returns, God judges not according to dogma, but according to alignment with the original voice. This terrifies the beast system, which thrives on confusion, multiplicity, and self-invention. But it empowers the remnant who finally understand the standard by which the world will be evaluated at Christ's appearing. And then comes the deepest truth of all. The registry does not return to Eden. Eden returns to the registry. We don't have to all go to Ethiopia, okay? The final act of history is not humanity ascending to an ancient garden, but the garden descending into a renewed creation in your heart, where your temple is. Revelation calls this the New Jerusalem, but its structure, its rivers, its tree of life, its immediate presence of God all mirror Eden. And this is not a coincidence. That's the restoration. And the registry returns first as revelation, then as alignment, then as witness, then finally habitation. The return of the registry is the beginning of the end for all counterfeit identities, counterfeit histories, and counterfeit kingdoms. It is God reclaiming what he authored. It's the revelation of the truth at the foundation of existence. It's the undoing of every lie whispered since the serpent's first question. Did God really say that? In the last days, everything hinges on testimony, and Adam's testimony rises first to expose the lie. And the testimony of Jesus follows to unveil the truth. And the testimony of the saints stands as the final light in a world collapsing under deception. The return of the registry is not simply historical, it is prophetic. It announces that the world is approaching the final courtroom where heaven presents its witnesses and every throne must respond. The registry's return is not an event either. It is a transition of authority, a shift from the age of forgetting to the age of remembering, but a shift from corrupting law to the law of life, a shift from human identity to divine identity, and a shift from exile to restoration. And I believe the registry's return is the first tremor of Eden's descent. So, in conclusion, as the evidence is weighed and the patterns are laid bare, a single truth begins to rise above the noise competing theories. The world is not witnessing the rediscovery of Eden by accident. The scrolls did not surface by chance. The ancient language did not return by human will. The seal described to Daniel was not placed merely on a text, but on a testimony, a legal record of the first man that would remain hidden until the final generation required its return. What is stirring now across the earth, from the volcanic ridge to the unsealed manuscripts, is the restoration of that testimony to its rightful jurisdiction. Every empire that claimed divine mandate, every occult order that attempted to rebuild Eden by force, every scholar who reduced the garden to myth, they all labored under the same blindness. They possessed fragments of memory, but not the registry. And without the registry, they could only imitate, but never restore. The counterfeit Edens of the elites, the technological towers reaching into the heavens, the engineered paradises offered a weary world, all reveal the same anxiety. The true Edenic record is awakening, and it does not belong to them. And the return of the registry signals more than the recovery of lost knowledge. It marks the re-entry of heaven's original testimony into the affairs of men. It is the moment when Adam's voice, long buried beneath layers of tradition, mistranslation, and suppression, begins to speak again, not to condemn the world, but to prepare it. The testimony of the first man is the prologue of the testimony of the Son of Man. And when the first rises, the second draws near. And this is why the nations rage. This is why the enemy accelerates. And this is why the timing of prophecy sharpens with each passing day. The awakening of Adam's sealed witness is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of the final chapter. For when the registry returns, the judge is at the door, and the world, knowingly or not, is being summoned back to the place where the story began, not to repeat the fall, but to witness the restoration that was written before the foundations of the earth. The story of the registry is a story of humanity in itself. It began in a garden where breath and law were the same thing, where identity was spoken by God and received without distortion, where the first record of life was written not on stone, but in the human spirit. It was sealed when Adam fell, preserved when journeyed east, and guarded by the righteous line, hidden in Ethiopia's mountains and forgotten by a world that no longer knew its beginning. But the end of the age is the age of remembering. The same testimony that went silent in Eden is stirring again, and the sealed books are resurfacing. The lost language is awakening. The land chosen to guard the registry is drawing global attention, and the earth itself is trembling near the ancient vault. And the Spirit of God is summoning a remnant who can recognize the voice that once shaped the world. The registry's return is not a theological novelty or an archaeological curiosity. It is the turning of the divine clock, and it is God signaling that the final act of history is approaching. The act when truth rises from its chamber, when deception collapses under the weight of revelation, and when the world is confronted not with religious tradition, but with the testimony written before time. The beast system rises because it knows the registry is returning. It builds its counterfeit because the true archive is awakening. And it races to define humanity because God is restoring the identity he wrote in the beginning. Darkness fears the registry because memory is liberation and origin is authority. And when humanity remembers who wrote its name first, no empire can claim ownership of the human soul. And in this moment, the remnant becomes the bridge between Eden past and Eden future. They carry the awakening inside them. They discern the hidden testimony. They walk in the law of life while the world embraces lawlessness. And they resist the counterfeit because they hear the original voice. And through them, the registry does what it has always done when God calls it forth. It prepares the earth for the appearing of the last Adam. So the registry's return is the restoration of the beginning before the end. And it is the voice of God rising again in the place where it first fell silent. It is the testimony of Adam awakening in the generation Daniel foresaw. And it is the sign that Eden is not a myth behind us, but a kingdom drawing near. So what was sealed is opening. What was hidden is remembering. What was lost is returning. And the registry speaks again. And the world will never be the same.
Why do 75% of people feel exhausted all the time? The answer might surprise you. In the 1920s, Standard Oil decided to dive into medicine. They pushed synthetic petroleum into our drugs. Sure, it masked symptoms, but it wrecked our guts. Our good bacteria, which fight off parasites and heavy metals, got wiped out by crude oil. But here's the good news. We can fix this by going back to nature. Introducing Elite Potion, the world's top detox program. It restores your good bacteria by removing toxic threats like aluminum, strontium, barium, and parasites. Imagine feeling energized and alive again. They said there couldn't be a pill that did it all. We invented it. Visit elitepotion.com and reclaim your health from synthetic pharmaceuticals. Your body will thank you.
This has been Cause Before Symptom with your host, James Carner. Go to his website, jamescarner.com, and sign up for his newsletter. Also, download his free books on the breath war, the crown of blood, and the ritual machine. Fix your body by buying his award-winning detox formula, removing heavy metals and parasites. You'll feel better and live longer. Go to elitepotion.com. And one more thing, please. Just try and love your neighbor, because if you do, the world would be a better place. See you tomorrow.